this as a threat in Islam, in the more fundamentalist forms of Islam. It's like, well, you should submit to Allah. It's like, hey, fair enough. Allah as interpreted by who? Oh, totalitarian, misogynistic mullahs. How about no? I don't buy your Allah, and I don't see who made you the good.
I can't remember who said this, but someone said that the poor believe religion is true, the middle class believes it's false, and the rich believe it's useful, or the powerful believe it's useful. I'm not powerful or rich, but I certainly consider it useful, and I can see that the lack of it has its negative impact as well. I just don't wish to submit myself to a rigid ideology of that kind, combined with the fact I don't believe in the big guy in the sky, right?
Okay, so let's not make it, okay, so let's agree that you shouldn't subordinate yourself arbitrarily to a rigid structure. Now, you might want to do that sporadically to discipline yourself, right? But the object shouldn't be submission. Now, what's weird in the biblical narrative, you know, is that the goal is not submission. It's so weird. It's covenantal relationship. And covenantal relationship is actually relationship. So one of the things you see with Moses, for example, and you also see this with Abraham, is that they're constantly negotiating with God. That's why the name of my next book, by the way, is We Who Wrestle with God. It's a negotiation. It's not a submission. And so God is always threatening to wipe out the Israelites in the desert. He's just sick and tired of their idol worship and their whiny resentment and their bitterness and their worship of the past tyranny. And he's constantly threatening just to wipe them out and start again.
Okay. He has said so much already. Just from that 1 minute, he has said, and the host as well said so much. And I want to try and kind of unpack it, because sometimes when he speaks, it's hard to understand what he's saying. So I'm going to try my best to unpack it. Bismillah. So aside from the clip in the beginning, because it's going to come back, they just did like a little coming up. The guy started by saying the poor believe in God, insinuating they have nothing else to do. The middle class, they don't, because they, for some reason, think they're too good. They have what they need, or they're too focused on the world, maybe. And the upper class think it's useful, so they could take advantage of those below them, you know, the elites. They use religion to keep people oppressed. Now, this is a stupid, silly narrative. It's a liberal, not liberal versus conservative, but like libertarian liberal narrative that's been created since the Renaissance, and since Europe was enlightened and they came out of the Dark Ages, mainly because of Islam, again, by the way. And they had this belief that, listen, the church kept us under for so long, we want to be free. So they made liberalism to make people as free as possible. And that is when they created this narrative that religion is just invented to keep people under. Their oppression built up for so long into this energy that just exploded into, I want to be free and all religion sucks. And the energy is being transferred down generation to generation. And that's why we have this narrative around today. Ask yourself, why does this narrative exist? You don't know. It just does. I just told you why. So they're going based off this narrative. And then the host himself, big man in the sky with a beard, clearly talking about Christianity. And by the way, with no disrespect to Christianity, they kind of ruin things for a lot of the other major religions, because a lot of Christianity is one of the biggest religions. So when they mess up, people just lump all religions in under their banner and say, well, look, Christianity believes in this and that. How does God love everyone, even people who do insanely horrible things? We don't have that stuff in Islam. But Anghel, how are you feeling about the video so far, man?
I'm just trying to understand like where he's coming from, like what happened mentally with him that he had this like just switch up, you know, because like we saw him in the videos that he was making with Muhammad Hijab.
Yeah.
And it seemed as though he was actually listening. He was sincere. He was making some kind of progress.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is that he's saying that like you have the prophets like Moses and Isa alayhi salam, and he's saying that they were wrestling with God, but they weren't submitting. It's like, bro, they definitely were submitting to God. They definitely were submitting to God. Like every single prophet has submitted to God. Every single person in this world submits to God. And if you're not submitting to God, then you're going to submit to something else. So what is that other thing that you're submitting to? Is it money? Is it the government? Like, what is it? You know, that's the real question. So I'm just kind of confused that he's saying they did not submit. Like, where's he getting this understanding from?
Yeah. So he's going based off the Bible, and the Bible, it does have this narrative. We've read some verses that even talk about some of the prophets of God, alayhim salam, and what it says that they did. So it wouldn't be surprising. I think for him specifically, I think it's never a black and white thing, right? It's always complex, many different colors that go into this kind of thing. So I think there are personal reasons. There are reasons around his upbringing. I think there are maybe even financial reasons. I know he's employed by a very specific organization who I will not name. That's backed by a very specific group who I also will not name. But if you guys want to do the research, just type into Google. You'll figure it out, inshallah. And accepting Islam or something would hinder him from.
We'll ruin that.
From that. Yeah. So many reasons. But yeah, what were you gonna say?
Bro, I mean, he says in the beginning too, like, oh, you have to submit to Allah, and he's like, okay, fair enough. But then he said, but whose interpretation of Allah are we talking about? Like, bro, are you serious? Like Allah, the creator, the one who created everything and everyone. Like, how is that so complicated? Why are you complicating things?
Yeah. And I think when it's weird because this is something that was pointed out in a discussion he had with Muhammad Hijab, where as soon as he was asked about a religious endeavor, he overcomplicated the whole thing. He literally asked, like Muhammad Hijab asked, do you believe in God or something like that? And Jordan Peterson responded by saying, what do you mean by do? What do you mean by you? What do you mean by believe? And what do you mean by God? Excuse me? What do I mean by do?
I remember this, yeah.
Yeah, it's insane. It's okay. Maybe we have to define God. No problem. We'll define God. It's not an issue because people understand God to be different things. Okay, we'll define God. Believe. Okay, maybe we can define believe because iman in Islam, right? Like faith is not just a blind faith. It's something based on evidence. So you can go based on that as well. You have evidence to a reasonable degree to establish a belief that you have in a something or something. Or someone, something or someone, pardon me. Okay, no problem. But do and you? Come on, man. That's way too far. But I also do want to unpack the whole thing he was talking about with, he doesn't want to submit to a kind of, he says this later, a totalitarian regime or a rigid system. Why not? Let's say you had the perfect system in life. You knew exactly how to live life, the best way to live life, not just for you, but for all of society. That system will be rigid because it will be specific. Because to live life in the best way, you have to be specific. And I know you know this because you talk about doing your bed and cleaning your room when you wake up in the morning. That's rigid. And that's why he gives room. You need to be rigid some places. You need to be rigid sometimes. Okay. But if you knew the perfect way to live, you would be rigid in all of it. And that is exactly what religion is, pardon me. That's exactly what Islam is. You are rigid in where you need to be rigid. You are rigid in the best way of life. Now, God has given us, leeway. You don't have to drink orange juice over milk because one is a little bit better than the other. Maybe you need calcium over vitamin C or whatever. Like, that there is that room for interpretation, that room for necessity, that room for improvement, that room for leeway, right? But his issue is he doesn't understand Islam. He doesn't understand God. And that's something I'm going to dig into a little bit later. Inshallah, I'll save it. But his main issue, the whole wrestling with God, why do you want to wrestle with God? And inshallah, I'm going to talk about that later on. But I'll let you, inshallah, jump in before we continue.
No, I think we should definitely jump in because this is reminding me so much of like different surahs, or not different surahs, but different ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah. And I want to bring them up, but I also want to continue. So let's continue, inshallah. And before we continue, just a question to the viewers right now. Like, what are y'all's thoughts? What do y'all think about what's going on so far? What do you think happened with Jordan Peterson with this switch up as of recently? Do you think it's what Rami is? Do you think it is what Rami is mentioning, or do you think it's something different? Do you think that he was like this from the rip?
It's a good question. And let's leave insults out of it. No, like, oh, he's crazy or anything like that.
Yeah.
Only legit answers, inshallah. All right, let's get back to the video.
And that's the apocalypse.